But then you have a project like the ST, not ST, DWM Window Manager and the Awesome WM Window Manager, where DWM is this very lightweight, basically, it's effectively a framework for a desktop. And then Awesome came along and they were like, this is a really cool core. And they added a Lua plugin framework, Lua configuration, this massive, massive changes to the project. And Awesome WM now stands on its own as a separate project from what it originally was. And I think the people who've spent, hundreds or thousands of hours working on this new on this new project also deserve something from the work they've done there. I don't think that just because they started off of somebody else's project initially, that until the end of time, all of the payment to that system should keep going back to upstream. And I get why they've done it like this, and it makes a lot of sense for projects like Ray, but I don't think it's suitable for a lot of, especially smaller projects.
Yeah, it hinders options and it hinders that momentum for those forks to generate and take off. And this is the most common thing that I see around people. What I think misusing open source is they're essentially trying to prevent forks, or they're scared of forks, or they want to prevent competitors within their space, and that's what they really care about. Which again, fair enough. But as you say, that's what's allowed so many projects, especially in the Linux community, to thrive. All the different variations of distros and desktop environments and everything like that. A lot of those do have some level of commercial backing, and again, because those groups of people, those businesses as well, have allowed momentum to build. And another example of quite recent is Terraform. By HashiCorp.
Okay.
And they swapped out the license terms to a now non-open source license, source available, I think, still. Mm-hmm. But a lot of, because I think it's like a production environment tool, or it's a tool to ultimately create specific environments. I'm not too sure exactly on how the tool is used. Mm-hmm. But a lot of businesses depended on it, and there was businesses offering services around that, and that might have been what the original authors were threatened by. I think they got taken over by new leadership at some point, but that might not fit into their business model. They wanted more control over their software, but because there was that following, because there were people using that, businesses using that, and businesses providing services around that, there was enough momentum for that to be a successful fork into what I think is now called Open Tofu. And same with Redis as well.
Developers are not great at naming things.
Redis is a recent example where that got its license swapped out, and then we got a couple of forks, one LGPL license by Drew DeVault, and then a more commercially backed version under the original, I think it was Apache license. So yeah, it's a core part of what has made open source software successful. It's just one that you don't realize may be important until you need to exercise it, really.
Right. I think that's a really good point. When things are going okay, the license doesn't really matter. It's when you need to decide, are we going to fork this project? Are we going to do something different? Where do we go from here? Where if you've signed a CLA, if you've got a certain license, it is going to really matter the structure of the project.
Yeah. So in this case, what if Futo gets bought? What if some new owners come in and then want to suck all the profit out of it, like we see so many times when companies get bought out of? Then you're kind of beholden to the original terms that prevent those other options from really taking off and becoming commercial offerings. So yeah, it's really important part. And that's one thing, again, why I think that education piece about the risks of open source is important. Because I put my software out there, I mean, it wasn't commercially focused at all to start with. But even now, I knowingly understand that there's risk to that. Someone could fork it, a big company could take that on and put a lot more effort into it than I'm putting on. and then release that in the open, or they could close it off because it's under the MIT license. But I'm kind of fundamentally okay. Know that I knew that when I was deciding the license. I know that still, and I don't intend to change the license because I think that's kind of a healthy part of what I want users to be able to do. I don't want them to be concerned about extra requirements of the license. I really wanted this to be able to go into businesses with limited friction. But that does limit, possibilities in the future. Someone can take it. Someone could put me out of business, and then I have to get a proper job. But that's the risk of it, I guess.
Yeah, that's yeah. You know what? That's a good way to put it, I guess. One of the things that Futo brought up is the idea of let me find their specific wording about malware, just so I'm not misquoting them on it. Put advertisements or other malware in our software. This is something you are not allowed to do. I think the issue with trying to disallow something like that is you are in a situation where you now have to define what is and is not malware. Because one of the examples I like to bring up is, what is the difference between a hotkey daemon and a keylogger? Under the hood, they are both functionally the exact same thing. They both serve the function of logging the keys that you press and doing some action based on that key press. The only difference is the intention of that software. The intention of a keylogger is, logging your keys, sending them to some server, do bad things with them. A hotkey daemon, the intention is provide a way to do hotkeys. But you now need to get into this weird debate of where is the line? Like, what is an advertisement? Is an advertisement something like including a link to your website, including a link to your GitHub somewhere in the application? Is it a pop-up notifying you of a new version? Like, where does this line exist? And I think without clear guidelines there, which are going to be incredibly difficult to design, I don't know how you can properly enforce a term like that.
Yeah, and there's so much open to interpretation there, and it's really within the eye of the beholder. And the way that I see it there is that it's really in the perspective of the author in that case. Because if you're taking that on, you're kind of accepting what they're defining as that which you might not know until it's too late. And it's even, what does an advertisement count? If I change the logo to be the logo of a fork, is that technically an advertisement for that fork? And yeah, this is a common issue that we get whenever people try and define their own terms. And there's ambiguity in commonly established license, like the GPL licenses. What does it mean to have a combined works that you have to provide the same rights to? And yeah, it's a challenge just to reduce that as much as possible. And we've seen that in other things, like I think it was for JSON, where there was something along the lines of don't use this for evil, or don't do any evil with the source code, which then caused a lot of contention because what does that mean?
Right.
I think that was a case where certain large companies had to go asking permission to be able to do evil from the author, so they can be assured that they're abiding by the license. So yeah, it's always a bit of a tricky scenario whenever you're trying to define these custom bits, which again kind of locks it to the author that bit more.